Well, welcome to Chapter 2. This is a chapter on the ancient Near East, and we're going to be focusing primarily on the Sumerians and the Assyrians, really the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia. Now, this is an area that we talk about a lot in high school, world history, etc. It's really an area that sort of arcs along the Tigris and the Euphrates River, right around here. And today, this would be modern-day Iraq. The difference is, at the time, the Tigris and the Euphrates are not dammed up. They're allowed to run over their banks. So much like the Nile River, they flood every year. And they actually, one floods in about May and one in late June. And when they do, that brings fertile soil up onto the land. And then they will use other techniques to actually increase the growing potential in the area. It's not really the desert that it is today. That's more of an issue of long-term climate change. I'm not talking about modern man-made. I'm talking about in the long term, we're moving from a period immediately following an ice age into the modern warm period. And this is often seen as the first seed of major civilization, although that's really a misnomer. This is not the first place that we see modern civilization. In fact, they will be trading with India. They will be trading in a limited extent with China, with other areas that develop as seeds of civilization. And as we start out, we're going to be dealing with the Sumerians, who are known for self-governed city-states. What this means is every city takes care of all of its own needs. So every city is its own state in and of itself. It would be like Milwaukee being its own state, Madison being its own state, each taking care of its own education, its own defense, etc. And these city-states under the Sumerians are only linked by culture and religion. And that's where we get this larger sort of Sumerian civilization. They have agriculture, as we've talked about, based on irrigation. They're building these channels. This is actually a model of one of their irrigation systems. And each of these channels would run off to another farmer's field. So the river is constantly being split and moved to grow crops. And this is where we're going to see wheat domesticated. We've already seen legumes domesticated. They have writing called cuneiform. And the cuneiform writing is basically a system of triangular forms used primarily for accounting. Its first uses are really in trying to keep track of who owes what for taxes, or how much everyone has grown in terms of crops. In terms of literature, we see the Epic of Gilgamesh, which you've probably come across at some point in high school or elsewhere, which is basically man versus the uncivilized world. And we also start to see community leaders who are directing activities and focusing on both secular and sacred activities, secular and sacred life. So government officials are going to take on dual roles, something we're going to see quite regularly through the Romans and actually into medieval life. We're going to start with the White Temple and Ziggurat, and this is obviously a reconstruction. And this would have been central to the city plan at Uruk, U-R-U-K. I'll turn up on the next slide. And it reflects the central role of religion in daily life. Now, in ancient religion, there is no sort of concept of morals and ethics as a part of religion. This is more community building. This is bringing people together to create an identity common within the community. And this is a theme that we'll deal with again with the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans. Modern religion turns up in the time of the Romans. The four corners of it, this is what it looks like today. The four corners of it face the four cardinal directions, which means they have an idea of those four cardinal directions. And it would have been more than likely dedicated to a sky god, because the ziggurat, when we look at it, really is simply an artificial mountain. There's nothing in that hill. There's no bodies. There's nothing there. This is a mud brick structure that artificially elevates the structure on top of it, that rectangular form known as a cella, Cella. And this whole temple would have been painted white. The cella itself may have looked something like this, and more than likely it was also mud brick and painted. And this, in ancient religion, is always a place for the priests. The public do not go into these cellas. It's not like today where the public can go into a church. And this is where gods would appear and speak to the priests. This is where sacrifices of various forms, depending on the society, are made to the gods. This is basically a place where the gods exist on earth. Therefore, the priests are the only ones who can enter, because they are the only ones who know how to handle conversation or communication with the gods. But religion is very central to the Sumerians, as we're going to see moving forward.